Well, Gavin Calver on Sunday was great, wasn't he?
He was fantastic.
Really great. And both sites, so
Yep.
Totton and
Totton as
Hedge
well.
End.
I hear he went down a storm at Totton as well.
Yeah,
so,
I think he did. Yeah, I think he did. And he's obviously head of the Evangelical Alliance, and I know you've had a big part to play in that over the years as well.
Well, it sounds better than it is,
right.
more impressive than it is. But yeah, I've been involved in EA for about 12 years, I think. Funnily enough, as of tomorrow, I finish my term.
Oh, right.
But I've been last 6 years. I've been chair of the EA Council and a member of the EA board. So, but it's sort of time limited terms, and my double term comes to an end. But I've loved being involved in EA. I really resonate with the call to unity, the need for a cohesive voice in society, and then the call to mission, and those kind of three big focal points of EA are big in my heart.
Yeah,
And,
I think as well, just having people from outside the local church coming into the local church to bring something is just so rich, isn't it? And, you know, I know speaking to him afterwards as well, and just that, you know, the privilege he has of travelling around so many different churches, and you know,
it was great. And then he even did a nice little Facebook on us afterwards, saying how much he loved being here.
Yes, I saw that. Great. That was really nice.
And I don't know if you picked this up, but he said afterwards how delighted he was to see about the access to translation, simultaneous live translation. And I think that was something he was hoping to kind of spread around to other churches that he'd witnessed it. So that was really encouraging.
And he was also really positive, wasn't he, about the whole book by book series? You know, a church that was going through the Bible book by book. So,
absolutely.
And that leads us on to Jonah, which is the
nice link. Yeah. Great segue there.
Beautiful, yeah. You know, actually, obviously his whole focus was on, you know, what times are we living in, isn't it? So look, I've just bought a little clock.
Ever
there,
creative.
I know. Just as a reminder, you know. But actually, the times that we're living in, and you know, that call to wake up.
Yes.
Really, I mean, he read the first 3 verses of chapter 1 of Jonah. Yeah. Such a beautiful story, anyway, and a very iconic story in terms of my many years of working in kids' work and things like that. But just that whole idea of Jonah being asleep in the boat. Yeah. And that call to wake up, which I think was a really good place to start, and felt a little bit like a prophetic word.
I thought so. I thought so. Really strong, because the trouble with it, with the kind of the Sunday school version, and let's not knock. Obviously, it's great that our kids learn these stories, but we can almost leave it there, can't we? And I thought him bringing it to us so strongly and directly and prophetically lifted it kind of beyond there to say, no, this is for us. It's not just a story. It's really God speaking.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was great.
And particularly, I'm conscious, you know, we're in 21 days of prayer and fasting, aren't we? And calling out to God for salvation, for, you know, a sense of us bowing the knee. So much of what he brought to us, I felt, in terms of the call for us, come on, this is serious. We're living in a culture that is, you know, lost and without hope. And actually, we have a message of hope to bring. So,
yeah, one of the themes that he often talks about in the EA context is about being brave and kind. And I kind of think that sums up so much of how he's positioning himself, but how we need to be as well. That, you know, we've got this message of the love and grace of God. It's in many ways a kind message, but actually to communicate it, we've actually got to be brave, because there are all kinds of obstacles and prejudices that people have that get in the way, and that can so easily silence us. And that whole kind of, no, wake up, be brave, and be kind.
I
really
think good.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. I don't know what phrase stuck in your mind, but I think when he talked about what's it, the satanic lullaby in the West.
Yes,
that was the phrase I think that
from
really,
the Iranian pastor.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So talking about some people that were obviously ministering in Iran, and then in great persecution came to the West. Settled there, and then it was the wife, wasn't it, woke up one day and just said, you know, actually I'm falling asleep here in terms of, you know, my fervour for God and things like that. This satanic lullaby in the background that just means that I'm losing the call of God on my life. And they chose to go back, didn't they? And
astonishing, isn't it? When you think of the risk for them. It reminded me of a little bit anyway, reminded me of being in a conversation with one of the leaders of another New Frontiers sphere, talking about having been, I can't remember if it was in Pakistan or China or another context, and kind of coming back from there saying, you know, hang on, post-pandemic, we're all feeling a little bit fragile and down and really struggling, and etc. Of course, one doesn't want to dismiss those things because that can be real. But he said, actually to be with people for whom standing up for Jesus means being willing to die, kind of absolutely, not just in theory sing a nice song about it, but it puts everything so much into context. And for me, that was a real wake up moment. The thing that stuck in my head just on the back of that sleeping thing was when he said something about living in a culture which is designed to send us to sleep. And that's really,
so what does that look like for us?
Well, what do you think? I'm still pondering it, really.
I must admit, when I was listening to him, I was reminded of a sermon that I'd heard many years ago by John Piper. And actually, I was so provoked, I went back and listened to it again when I got home after Sunday. And he called the sermon, Don't Waste Your Life. I think he preached this years ago to an audience of literally thousands of young people. And he had this line, what is a tragedy? Tragedy. And he said 3 days previously, 2 women in his church had passed away, 2 ladies in their 80s, and they died, I think, while on mission in Cambodia or somewhere like that. And, he talked about their lives given over to loving people, loving Jesus, serving God faithfully, and then dying overseas. And he said, is that a tragedy? And he said, no, that is not a tragedy. Absolutely. And he said, let me tell you what a tragedy is. And he lifted up this copy of Reader's Digest magazine. Do you remember them?
Yeah, I do. I'm old enough for that.
And he read this article out of these 2, this couple who had taken early retirement, one at 51 and one at 59. And they had taken early retirement. They had bought a place in Florida. They'd got a huge boat. They were playing softball and they were collecting shells. And he said, can you see them? That's the rest of their life, collecting shells. Can you see them when they cross the line into eternity and they say to Jesus, Lord, look at my collection of shells. He said, that's a tragedy. That is a tragedy. He was saying, we live one life. And how we live it makes such a difference, such an impact. So, and I think, you tie that in with this whole sleepiness culture, and you think, is that what it looks like to us, that we're living life now, just hoping for comfort, hoping for the sort of, I suppose, the American dream of, retiring and being well off and settling down? Or are we going to cross the line like those 2 old ladies, still serving Jesus?
It's like, I suppose, like so many sort of temptation things, there's not idolatry things that. Because the culture doesn't say, we'll send you to sleep and give you a nice rest. The culture says, this is life. Life is the car. Life is the lifestyle. Life is the house. Life is craft your own identity. All those kinds of wake up to real life. But actually what it's doing all the time is putting us to sleep to ultimate life. Because it's telling us that life is all here and now. There's not really an eternity to worry about. Life is you and your choices. There's not accountability to God. And it does. It's a great metaphor, isn't it? To say it's like going to sleep to what's real. Yeah, very powerful. Yeah,
and it's getting locked into perhaps things like entitlement, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, I've worked hard. I deserve this. Yeah. And live, and that's what the culture would tell us. I think this is your right. This is what you deserve.
Absolutely.
Rather than actually, Jesus laid down his life.
Yeah.
And that's what he calls us to do, ultimately, to lay down our lives.
And he kind of went there later in the talk, didn't he? With that dying to self.
Yeah, dying to self. That was his second thing, wasn't it?
Which you don't hear very much about, do we? To be honest, it's so counter. Everything in the culture is discover yourself, assert yourself, you be you, not die to self, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the things I've been thinking about in this 21 days is kind of, in a way, the way the culture sends us to sleep by telling us what's really important. And so my confession is I love podcasts on current affairs. This is going to make me sound very Radio 4 and very dull, which I am.
No.
There are half a dozen podcasts all on kind of contemporary politics, which I listen to almost like an addict if I'm not careful. And, ultimately, it's a good thing to be aware of what's going on. We need to understand the times. That was one of his points, wasn't it? But if I listen to it all the time, what it's telling me is all the time what really, really matters is who's going to win in America. How's the new government doing? What's going on in the NHS? And, of course, those things are important for the welfare of our society, but they're not the most important stuff. So one of the things I one of my ways of fasting in these 21 days is actually I'm not listening to any of those podcasts for these 21 days. And I've got this slightly quirky podcast called Two Texts, where a couple of probably slightly nerdy Bible scholars are just chatting about Bible texts. And so I'm listening to those when I would be listening to other things, having a shower or whatever. And it is really interesting how it just changes the internal narrative. Some other stuff starts to feel important. And it's just made me think, social media, we all take cheap shots at social media. But if we use it in an undisciplined way, that is absolutely part of the sending us to sleep agenda, I think.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm reading Natalie Williams' book at the moment, Tis Mercy All, which I am just loving. And she made that point just this morning, actually. She was talking about the fact that, most of the way we perceive situations in the world, we gain through social media. That's, our judgment on who we show mercy to will come through what we watch, what we listen to, and things like that. And, it's just like moving away from the passage of Jonah. But actually, I think that whole sense of, what we listen to in our culture can so determine how we feel rather than biblical truth. And he ends up with that, doesn't he? Time to Stand was his last one, which really was the whole idea of, being more serious about your faith and your spiritual disciplines and, making sure that actually our reason for living, our attitude towards life, everything comes from biblical truth and not from what culture would throw at us.
Such a powerful challenge, isn't it? One, just picking up on Natalie, I haven't read the book because somebody's nicked my copy. But,
I don't know who that would be.
But when I do, I think Natalie, I'm a real fan of Natalie. I think she's fantastic. But her whole thing about, Christian contribution into society and Christian voice in society and serving society, I think has got a real resonance with Jonah, actually, that is maybe just worth landing on for a moment too, because like this Nineveh that Jonah is sent off to is, a pagan city. It's full of idolatry. It's full of people that don't know the left hand from their right. You would think this is the kind of city that represents everything that is anti-God and that God would basically want to wipe it off the map. But what you get instead is him sending this reluctant prophet who in a way embodies the calling of Israel to be the mission of God to the nations, and it's now focused in Jonah just as it gets focused in Jesus later on. But he's sent to this city with this message that God really cares about this messed up idolatrous city. And I always love the way the book kind of finishes with, can I just read it because it's so powerful, but where Jonah's worrying about the plant that's died, and God says, you feel sorry about the plants, though you did nothing to put it there. It came quickly and died quickly. But Nineveh, implication which I created, because you didn't create the plant, I did. You didn't do anything about it. Nineveh, which is like my project, has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention all the animals, which I really love. Shouldn't I care about that city? Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city? And the whole book finishes with this question that just hangs. And I've gone to know, well, Jonah, what did you say? But the whole point is not what Jonah said. It's what do we say? God's heart for the city, including for our city, it's not a perfect city. It's got its own idolatries and its own injustices and its own resistance to God. But God loves our city and wants us to love it. And it isn't just that he loves the people in the city. What about the animals too? It's so intriguing, it says about that.
A whole picture of God's creation there, isn't it?
Exactly. And God's passion and care for it. So, for me, the challenges from what Gav brought to us so brilliantly, they kind of hang there, but they hang there with this question hanging as well of, okay, shouldn't God care about that? Yeah, God should. Well, in that case, what about the people that are meant to represent him in the world? Shouldn't we care about our city? Just reading Jeremiah in my devotions at the moment, and that whole seek the welfare of the city. And again, it's Babylon they're talking about. It's the anti-God city, and God's people are meant to be there seeking its welfare, which is such a calling to us, I think.
Again, so often we can sit in judgment, can't we? We can, be within the four walls of the church and think we've got it sorted, and
Yeah.
we can wrongly, I think, sit in judgment,
Definitely.
of the world around us, when actually God is saying, come on, what are you doing? How are you going out there? How are you showing the mercy of God?
Absolutely.
Which, takes us perhaps into the area that you're really looking at in church life as well, in terms of social action, doesn't it? And
no, absolutely, it does.
Yeah.
Serving the city. So I was listening. I think it was that quirky podcast I was listening to this week where someone was saying, that phrase John 3:16, God so loved the world, and then kind of saying the one thing that nobody would have been expecting to finish that sentence was the words the world. The world, which is everything which is against God.
Yes.
But God so loved the world, and that's the same world that we've got to love in word and deed as well.
No, it was really thought-provoking, wasn't it? I wrote a quote from C.T. Studd's poem as well, which says, "Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." And just that sense that actually, what are we investing our life in? What are we really giving ourselves to live for? Because actually only one thing at the end of the day, that day when we cross into eternity, God's not going to say, let me see your shell collection, is he? God is going to ask, what have you invested your life in? And I want it to really count for something. So.
Absolutely. Oh, that's brilliant. Can I ask you a question that's
Please
unscripted and that there's enough gap that it can be closed off if it's too long? But thinking about that and sort of halfway into our weeks of prayer and fasting, I suppose I'm just wondering, you're a godly woman and you're seeking God. I'm wondering, is there anything that you're beginning to feel is forming in your heart as we're seeking God through this time in terms of expectation?
21 days. I'm really living with just a sense of excitement. When you sometimes feel that bubble in you because you're looking forward to something, like we're actually going on holiday soon, so you get that sense of looking forward to something, you have a bubble inside you, and I feel that spiritually. And I don't know whether it's a new move of God in terms of salvation. I really pray it is. That's what I'm really believing God for. But I think there's just this corporate call at the moment that we've got in these 21 days to bow the knee. I think there's something about surrender that God is calling us to as a church. I think there's a real heart cry to pray more, to encounter God more. I see that appetite and hunger in people. We had our half night of prayer on last Friday, and it was just so exciting. Just the spiritual temperature in the room, but the number of people coming as well, saying, actually, we want to pray, we want to hear God. So, go on, I'm going to bounce the question back to you as well. What are you feeling?
Oh, well, nothing as profound as what you're feeling. I think that's a great answer. But it's sort of in tune with it. We had our early morning prayer this morning, and again, the emphasis on bowing the knee and that Philippians passage that every knee will bow. And I think the thing that was striking me is that, Jesus isn't a means to an end. Yeah, he does lots of wonderful things for us, but he's not a means to our end, which we tend to make him in our self-centered world. He is the end. Everything is created in him, through him, and to him, literally, or for him. And so just really resonating with that bowing the knee theme, that actually what we're pursuing in mission, it is about change lives, absolutely, but it's change lives in the sense that they become oriented towards Jesus because everything is for him. And that's where people find real life. It's not that Jesus fulfills their dreams, it's that he reframes their dreams to the ones that they were made for, because everything is for him. So it's really just the same thing of the bowing the knee thing and the supremacy of Jesus in that.
Brilliant.